Okay, now it's 11:30. It's Tuesday, and I welcome everyone to this week's CASR lunch talk. And it's a great pleasure for me to introduce to you Professor Kasper Larsen, who is a New Testament scholar from Aarhus University, and I believe also affiliated somehow to the ongoing CASR project that Liv Ingeborg Lid and Marianne Bjelland-Katzo is conducting here in Oslo. But you are in Aarhus now, Kasper, and I look very much forward to hear about your ongoing research about programmatic scenes in the New Testament and other ancient literature. So please.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Sitting here in the country where we have actually this year had a national championship of cross-country skiing, which we can not have every year, but it's cold and there's snow actually this year. What I would like to do is to present to you an ongoing project that is beginning right now. It is sponsored by Carlsberg. They have paid a one-year salary for me that I'm going to use from next summer on to write a monograph on this topic. I began initial research on it in Oslo in January with at the CASR Center with Liv Ingeborg and Marianne. But this is work that is going to be done primarily next year. But what I would like to do now is to present my monograph idea, and I would like very much to have response from you concerning the name that I'm going to give these scenes, programmatic scenes. Could it be done better? And another question: how can the ancient manuscripts be used in this context? But what is a programmatic scene? It is, according to my definition, the main character's first public programmatic appearance. And so it is the first public speech, the first public action, or the first military campaign in ancient narratives, particularly in the ancient biographies. And it is, of course, an ethic genre category that I am making up. I'm not able to find very good equivalent names for it from antiquity. Unlike, for example, recognition scene and agnoresis, it's not an emic category, but it's an ethic. And in New Testament studies, we have a lot of ethic genre categories like apocalypse and call narrative and so on. So yeah, this is how we have to work sometimes. My hypothesis is that this programmatic first appearance, public appearance, is a common device in ancient biographies. It serves to prime the reader to present the character in full from the very beginning, and that it represents a kind of miniature of the whole work, a key to understanding the whole work in which it appears. In New Testament studies, people have often talked about a programmatic scene in the Gospel of Luke, Luke 4:16-30. But what I want to do is to claim that programmatic scenes do we actually find in all four New Testament Gospels, and it is a general thing in ancient biographies. And nota bene, we have different programmatic scenes in the four different Gospels, which shows how important the first public action is. Just to give you a few examples from the ancient biographies, Cornelius Nepos' biography on Themistocles says the following: the first step in his public career came in connection with the war with Corcyra. Chosen general by the people to carry on that contest, he inspired the Athenians with greater courage, not only at that time, but also for the future. So this is the first military campaign of Themistocles, and it contains promises for the future. Also, another example from Plutarch, this brought Ketu for the first time and against his wishes into the forum. He opposed the tribunes and was admired for the proof of eloquence and high character which he gave. For his speech had nothing about it that was juvenile or affected, but was straightforward, full of matter and harsh. So here is the first public speech of Ketu the Younger in a public forum. Just a few examples. So how do we find this in the Gospels? According to this understanding of the programmatic scene, the programmatic scene in Mark is the first exorcism in 1:21 to 28, the healing of the man with an unclean spirit. We, of course, have a programmatic statement in 1:15 regarding the nearness of the kingdom of God, but the actual programmatic scene is 1:21 to 28. This means that what goes on before that is preparations. We have to hear about John the Baptist, the temptation, the calling of the first disciples, and after that we get the first public appearance. And it is programmatic in a lot of senses. Don't have time to explain, but this first scene illustrates the nearness of the kingdom of God. It shows how Jesus is a successful wonder worker, his authority, his halakha, his conflict with authorities, and his secret identity. So main motives of the whole Gospel of Mark are already there in Nuche, in the programmatic scene, the first exorcism. Moving on to Matthew, I would say that the Sermon on the Mount is the programmatic scene. That is quite late in the story, chapter 5. But if we look at it, the first 4 chapters are actually preparatory chapters. So the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus' first public appearance. Looking at what is before that is the birth of Jesus, and we do have a couple of summaries that tell us about Jesus' public teaching, but they are summaries, not full scenes. And what is interesting in Matthew is that he has taken the Markan programmatic scene and used it as a frame for the Sermon on the Mount. So the last summary in 4:23 to 25 and the ending of the Sermon of the Mount echo the Markan programmatic scene. And there are lots of programmatic motifs in the Sermon of the Mount, of course. Jesus as new Moses, righteousness, deeds before doctrine, divine judgment, imitatio Dei, important motifs in the Gospel of Matthew as a whole. In Luke, we have the Jesus in the synagogue of Nazareth. Maybe I should, for the sake of time, skip this one, because that is well known, and move on to John, where I would say that we have a programmatic diptych of a sort. We have 2 programmatic scenes, the wedding in Cana, which is called Archeton Semaion, the first or the most important of the signs, the first public appearance of Jesus in chapter 2. But the temple incident also seems to have a programmatic character, because here John moves a late scene from the Jesus tradition to the very front of the narrative. We could say, just as Luke did with the preaching in the synagogue in Nazareth, moved a story from Mark 6 to the beginning of the narrative. So this seems to be a tendency, or at least we find it a couple of times in the Gospels. So chapter 1 is preparation before Jesus' public appearance in John. And we also have these programmatic motifs in the 2 programmatic scenes in John. the hour, human versus divine will, signs, revelation of glory, belief, temple Christology, post-Easter hermeneutics, very important themes in the Gospel of John as a whole that are introduced here. Okay, what I want to do in my monograph is to show how the programmatic scene appears in biographies and in the New Testament Gospels, but also to discuss whether early readers of the Gospels would have a similar view on these scenes, highlighting them as particularly important scenes. And you can find that in some of the second or third, fourth century commentators, Origen, for example, discussing which scene, the Markan or the Johannine, is in fact the first scene, the first action of Jesus. But this reception of the programmatic scenes may also be seen in the manuscripts. And I have been looking into the Kephalaia, the ancient chapter divisions used for liturgical or reading purposes in Codex Alexandrinus and other manuscripts. And if we go to Mark, it is remarkable that the first chapter of Mark is not Mark 1:1, but it is the actual scene that I call the programmatic scene, the healing of the demoniac. So that is highlighted as chapter 1 in this division system. Maybe the writers of this manuscript see Mark 1:1-20 as a kind of prologue to Mark. If we move on to Matthew, the programmatic scene is not the first chapter in Matthew, but it is remarkable that the Sermon on the Mount, chapter 5-7 in Matthew, is seen as one unit in the Kephalaia called the Beatitudes. That is one unit in this divisional system. Luke in the Kephalaia to Luke, we do not have a highlighting of 4:16-30, but we do have that in an older division in the Codex Vaticanus, where we can see clear marks showing where the preaching in the synagogue in Nazareth begins and ends. And if we go to John, back to the Kephalaia, we can see that as in the case with Mark, the first chapter is the same scene as the one I call the programmatic scene. Actually, the two first scenes here are the two programmatic scenes of John, the wedding in Cana and the temple incident. I'm not claiming that this is a first century understanding of the Gospels, but it shows how early readers divide the text and highlight the so-called programmatic scenes as special. So the overall aim of my project, I'm rounding off now, is to demonstrate how the programmatic scene functioned in ancient rhetoric and literature, biographies in particular. Maybe we also have some equivalents in the Hebrew Bible. The prophet is called, and after that we have the prophet's first public appearance. I want to also to identify and analyze the variety of programmatic scenes in the 4 New Testament Gospels, and 3, to show how ancient Christian gospel users in their exegetical practice and manuscript culture applied special significance to the programmatic scenes. So thank you very much for your time.